The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she blinked awake, the sterile scent of antiseptic stinging her nose. The hospital room was a blur of white and beige, monitors beeping softly beside her. A nurse bustled in, glancing at her chart. "Good morning, Emily," she said with a practiced smile. Emily. The name landed like a foreign object in her mind. It didn't fit, didn't spark anything, no recognition, no warmth. Her head throbbed, a dull ache that seemed to pulse with every question she couldn't answer.
Who am I?
Why am I here? Her hands trembled as she touched the bandage wrapped around her forehead. The nurse noticed her confusion. "You had a nasty fall, dear. Concussion, some memory loss. It'll come back, don't worry. Your husband will be here soon." Husband. Another word that felt wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot. When he arrived, an unremarkable man with kind eyes and a nervous smile, she studied him. Dark hair, slightly graying. A soft voice that called her, and spoke of a life she couldn't picture. Their small house, their dog, their weekend hikes. He held her hand, but her skin crawled at his touch. Her gut screamed, "You don't know him." Days passed, each one a fog of routine meals, meds, his visits. He brought her flowers, told her stories, but the stories felt like fiction. She smiled politely, nodded, while her instincts churned. Something was off. She couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes lingered too long, searching for something in her she couldn't give. On the third night, unable to sleep, she slipped out of bed. The hospital was quiet, the hallways dim. Her bare feet patted against the cold linoleum as she crept toward the medical records room, driven by a need she couldn't name. The door was locked, but a paperclip from a nurse's clipboard and a few shaky twists did the trick, skills she didn't know she had. Inside, she rifled through files, her hands trembling as she searched for Emily Carter. She found her chaw. She clutched the paperclip under the pillow, its sharp edge a small anchor in the storm of her thoughts. The man who called himself her husband, David, he'd said, sipped his coffee, his eyes flicking to her with that same searching intensity. She studied him back, noting the way his fingers tapped nervously on the cup, the slight strain in his smile. Her gut churned again, louder now. He's not who he says he is. "Doctor says you might get discharged soon," David said, leaning forward. "We can go home, Em.
Get you settled.
Things you'll feel normal again." Normal. The word grated. Nothing about this felt normal, not the name, not the hospital, not him. She nodded anyway, keeping her voice soft. "That sounds nice." Her mind raced, piecing together fragments. The death certificate. Her missing memories. The way her instincts screamed to run. That night, she waited until the hospital quieted, the nurse's chatter fading into the hum of machines. She slipped out again, her heart pounding as she retraced her steps to the records room. This time, she wasn't looking for her own file. She needed answers about him. The lock gave way faster now, her fingers steadier with the paperclip. Inside, she scanned the shelves, her eyes catching on a file labeled Carter, David. She pulled it, her breath hitching. The file was thin, too thin for patient's history. It contained a single page, a visitor log, listing David Carter as her emergency contact. No medical history, no address, no prior visits. Just a name and a phone number. Below it, a handwritten note, advised to monitor closely. Patient unaware of incident details.
Incident.
What incident? She flipped the page, but there was nothing else. Frustration clawed at her. She needed more, something to explain the death certificate, the man, the void in her head. Noise outside, a soft shuffle of footsteps. She froze, shoving the file back and ducking behind a cabinet. The door creaked open, and a flashlight beam swept the room.
A security guard.
She held her breath, pressing herself into the shadows until he left, muttering about damn kids. When the door clicked shut, she exhaled, but her relief was short-lived. Time was running out. David would be back in the morning, and if she didn't figure this out, she'd be discharged, sent home with a stranger. Back in her room, she sat on the bed, the paperclip now a talisman in her pocket. She needed a plan. The hospital's computer system might have more answers, but she'd need access. Nurse credentials, maybe. She'd seen the nurses log in at the station, their passwords typed carelessly. Tomorrow, she'd watch closer. Morning came, and with it, David. He brought her a sweater, claiming it was hers. Thought you'd want something familiar, he said, his smile tight. The sweater smelled of lavender, but it sparked nothing. No memory, no comfort. She thanked him, her eyes lingering on his phone as he set it on the tray table. If she could get that, maybe she'd find something, texts, photos, proof. As he talked about their life, she nodded, her mind elsewhere. The nurse's station was just down the hall. David's phone was inches away, and the paper clip in her pocket felt heavier, sharper, like a promise. She didn't know who she was, but she'd find out. And if David wasn't her husband, she'd make him regret whatever game he was playing. The hospital room felt smaller each day, the walls closing in as her questions multiplied. She sat cross-legged on the bed, the lavender sweater folded neatly beside her, untouched. David's phone still sat on the tray table, its screen dark but tempting. He was in the bathroom, the sound of running water masking her movements. Her fingers itched to grab it, but she hesitated. If he caught her, what would he do? That nervous smile of his hid something. She was sure of it. She glanced at the door, then back at the phone. No time to waste. She snatched it, her heart hammering as she swiped the screen. No passcode, sloppy. She opened his. Messages scrolling quickly. Most were mundane. Work updates, a reminder to pick up milk, a text to someone named Claire that read, "She's stable, but still doesn't remember."
Stick to the plan.
Her stomach dropped. Who was Claire? What plan? The bathroom door clicked. She shoved the phone back, barely settling into her seat before David emerged, drying his hands.
You okay, Aim?
You look pale. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to her, a fraction too long. Just tired, she said, forcing a weak smile. Her mind raced.
Claire. The plan.
The death certificate. Pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve, but she was close. She could feel it. That afternoon, while David stepped out for a work call, she made her move. The nurse's station was busy, a flurry of activity as shift change approached. She'd watched the nurses enough to know their habits. One, a young woman named Sarah, always left her ID badge on the counter while grabbing coffee. Sure enough, there it was, clipped to a lanyard. She palmed it, her pulse racing, and slipped back to her room before anyone noticed. That night, she waited until the ward quieted, the graveyard shift settling into its rhythm. With Sarah's badge in hand, she crept to the nurse's station, the computer glowing softly in the dim light. She swiped the badge, the login screen blinking to life. Her fingers trembled as she typed Emily Carter into the patient database. The screen loaded slowly, each second an eternity. Finally, her file appeared, basic info, concussion details, nothing new. But there was a linked file, marked restricted access. She clicked, only to be met with a password prompt. She tried Sarah's name, the hospital's name, random guesses. Nothing worked. Frustration burned, but she couldn't linger. She logged out, wiped the keyboard, and returned the badge before slipping back to her room. David's visit the next morning was different. He seemed edgier, his usual small talk clipped. "Doctor says you're good to go, Tomo." "Tomorrow," he said, his eyes darting to hers. "We'll get you home, fresh start." She nodded, her throat tight. Home. With him. The thought made her skin crawl. She needed more time, more answers. The restricted file nagged at her. Whatever was in there, it was key. And Claire, whoever she was, knew something. As David left, she noticed he'd forgotten his coffee cup. She grabbed it, not sure why, until she saw the faint lipstick smudge on the rim. Not hers. She hadn't worn makeup in days. Her grip tightened on the cup, the paper clip in her pocket digging into her thigh.
Claire.
The plan. The death certificate. She was running out of time, but she wasn't helpless. Tonight, she'd try the computer again. And if that failed, she'd confront him, paperclip in hand, ready for whatever came next, The hospital's night shift was a ghost town, the halls silent except for the occasional beep of a monitor or the creak of a cart. She waited until a nurse's footsteps faded before slipping out of her room, Sarah's ID badge tucked in her gown's pocket. The paperclip, now her constant companion, pressed against her thigh, a reminder she wasn't defenseless. The coffee cup with the lipstick smudge sat hidden under her mattress, a piece of evidence she didn't yet understand but refused to let go. At the nurse's station, the computer hummed softly, its screen casting a pale glow. She swiped the badge, the login screen flashing green. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up her file again. The restricted file still taunted her, its password prompt a wall she couldn't breach. She tried variations of David's name, her supposed name, even Claire. Nothing. Her frustration boiled, but she couldn't afford to lose focus. She needed something, anything else. She searched the database for David Carter. No patient records, just the same visitor log from before. Then she typed Claire. A hit. Claire Donovan, listed as a discharged patient from 2 weeks ago. Diagnosis: minor head injury. The hospital was a tomb at midnight, the silence broken only by the hum of machines and her own ragged breathing. She clutched Sarah's ID badge, her lifeline to the truth, and slipped into the nurse's station one last time. The computer flickered to life, and she pulled up her file, the restricted section glaring back at her. The password prompt mocked her, but she had one last idea. She typed C. Donovan, the name from the death certificate's smudged signature. The screen blinked, then opened. Her heart stopped. The file was a police report, dated 4 days ago. It described a car accident. Emily Carter, pronounced dead at the scene, blunt force trauma. A grainy photo showed a mangled car, a woman's body, her face eerily similar to her own. The report noted a witness, Claire Donovan, who claimed Emily was her sister. David Carter, listed as the husband, had identified the body. But a final line chilled her. Asterisk autopsy pending. Identity verification incomplete. Asterisk. She wasn't Emily. Or was she? Her head spun, the concussion's fog blending with this new nightmare. If she wasn't Emily, who was she? And why was David so insistent she was his wife? The texts, the lipstick, Claire's name. It pointed to a setup, but for what? Footsteps snapped her out of it. She logged out, shoved the badge back, and darted to her room, her mind racing. The paperclip in her pocket felt heavier, a weapon now. She had hours until discharge, hours until David took her to a home. She didn't know. She couldn't wait for more answers. She had to act. Morning came, and David arrived, his thermos in hand, his smile a mask. "Ready to go, Em?" he said, too cheerful. She nodded, slipping the paperclip into her sleeve, its point sharp against her wrist. As he packed her things, she grabbed his phone from the tray table, pretending to adjust the sweater he'd brought. She slipped it into her gown's pocket and excused herself to the bathroom. Locked inside, she opened his texts. The thread with Claire was. The hospital's clock ticked toward midnight, each second tightening the knot in her chest. She sat on the edge of her bed, the scrap of paper with Claire's patient ID crumpled in her fist, the paperclip a cold weight in her pocket. The death certificate's smudged signature, C. Donovan, burned in her mind. Claire was no bystander. She was central to whatever this was. And David, with his rehearsed stories and nervous eyes, was her only way to the truth. Discharge was hours away. She had to act now. She slipped into the hall, the hospital eerily still. The nurse's station was unmanned, Sarah's badge still where she'd left it earlier. She grabbed it and headed for the records room, her last shot at the restricted file. The badge worked, the computer flickered to life. She typed her name, pulled up the file, and faced the password prompt again. Her hands hovered over the keys. C. Donovan. She typed Claire Donovan. The screen blinked. Access granted. Her breath caught as the file loaded, a single document, a police report. It described a car accident 2 weeks ago, Emily Carter, deceased on impact. Driver, Claire Donovan, minor injuries, discharged. Witness, David Carter, unharmed. Notes detailed a discrepancy in Emily's identification, flagged for investigation. Her vision blurred. She was Emily or had been. But if she was dead, who was she now? And why was David pretending she was his wife? A creak behind her. She spun, heart lurching. David stood in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide. What are you doing? His voice was soft, but his hand gripped the doorframe too tightly. She backed against the desk, fingers closing around the paperclip. Who are you, David? And who's Claire? Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. His shoulders sagged, the mask slipping. You weren't supposed to find out like this.